All right, welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. And today, we're looking at Jamaica,
Okay.
specifically how Jamaica might deal with some of its issues with gangs.
Interesting.
And, you always bring such great expertise to these deep dives. I really appreciate you joining.
Oh, it's always my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Now, we're only working from one source today, right?
That's right, yeah.
Just one single text. And it's suggesting something pretty bold, pretty controversial.
Okay.
And it's actually inspired by something that happened recently in El Salvador.
Uh-huh.
And the question is, could this approach that El Salvador took,
Right.
which honestly got a lot of attention, globally,
I remember that.
could it actually offer some insights for Jamaica?
Okay, yeah.
Let's dive into this.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
So it's a complicated situation for sure.
Mhm.
And the text we're looking at, it's really coming from a place of,
Yeah,
I don't know, I guess you could say like urgency.
exactly, yeah. Urgency and frustration, I think you could say.
Yeah, absolutely. Frustration, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It reads, time for Jamaica to get, though. The only way for this to happen is to be like what El Salvador president did, or else the gangs will always control Jamaica.
Wow.
So what exactly did El Salvador's president do?
Well, he took a really, really tough stance on these gangs.
Hmm.
Like, really tough. Like, they called it a state of emergency.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And this meant sending in the military,
Oh, wow.
arresting, tens of thousands of people who they thought were part of gangs.
Okay.
And then building these huge prisons to put everyone in.
So, they weren't messing around.
No, not at all. And it did have a big impact. Like, before all this happened,
Yeah.
El Salvador had one of the worst murder rates in the world.
Oh, I bet.
Like an average of 50 murders for every 100,000 people.
Oh, my gosh.
But get this, by 2023,
Yeah.
that rate went down to something like 7.8 per 100,000.
Wow, it's a massive drop.
Yeah.
Massive drop in crime, but that fast, that quick, it does make you wonder how they did it.
It does. It makes you wonder about the methods, right?
Yeah.
You're right. It wasn't all smooth sailing.
Imagine.
While the government was saying, look, crime's down, human rights groups, they had a different story.
Yeah, I bet.
They started pointing out all these cases where they said people were being arrested for no good reason.
Okay, so just rounding people up.
Yeah, basically. They called it arbitrary detention. Like, imagine just getting caught in a raid because you happen to live in an area where a gang is active, even if you had nothing to do with them. That's the kind of stuff that really worried people.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It is, yeah.
But bringing it back to the text we're looking at,
Right.
is this model, could it even work in Jamaica?
Yeah.
Like, how similar are these two countries when you talk about gangs?
Yeah, it's tempting to just say, oh, yeah, they're both dealing with gangs, same solution. But the reality is more nuanced.
I bet.
Yeah, both Jamaica and El Salvador, they've got gangs. But the gangs themselves, how they're structured, where they get their power, even what drives people to join them in the first place, it's all different.
Okay, so if someone said, let's try that El Salvador approach in Jamaica,
Right.
what would we need to know?
Yeah.
What would be really important to figure out before even considering that?
Well, you got to go deeper than just looking at the crime numbers.
Obviously.
You got to ask, why is there gang violence in Jamaica in the first place?
Right.
Is it all about poverty, lack of opportunity, politics, or is it a mix of things?
Right.
Until we figure that out, we can't really talk about solutions that are actually going to work long term.
Yeah.
And a really, really important thing to think about is what could happen if you go with such a drastic approach.
Like the unintended consequences.
Exactly. Even if it does bring crime down in the short term, it could make other problems even worse,
Right. And that brings us back to what we were talking about before, this whole idea of short-term versus long-term. And the text we're looking at, it's clearly coming from a place of worry.
Oh,
People want to feel safe.
of course. Yeah.
They want security.
Yeah.
But the solution being suggested, it brings up some serious questions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Ethical questions, practical questions.
Definitely. And that's the big takeaway for everyone listening, right? How do you balance the need to do something now
Right.
with the need to find solutions that are actually thought out and sensible?
Right.
Can we learn from what happened in El Salvador,
Mm-hmm.
both the good and the bad,
Yeah.
and find a way to deal with the root causes of violence
Yeah.
while still protecting people's basic human rights?
Yeah. That's the challenge. Right?
It is. It's a big challenge.
And I think you've given our listeners a lot to think about. And I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always a
Crazy.
pleasure.
Apparently,
And,
the actual president of El Salvador posted this video last night saying that police intelligence has determined that a group of gang members are hiding in the 10 neighborhood in San Marcos, San Salvador. Today, in the early hours of the morning, we have established a security fence throughout the colony with 2,000 soldiers and 500 policemen to extract every last gang member found in the area. I'm telling you right now, like, El Salvador doesn't mess around when it comes to enforcing the laws, because they've had such a serious issue with gang violence, and they're just like, we're not playing this game anymore. We're done. We're done doing this. We're gonna extract this at the root.